Hey, Daily Dosers, thanks for tuning in. It is 4th of July week, and this week on the Daily Dose, we're talking all about freedom. We're talking specifically about Christian freedom. As Christians, we talk about freedom a lot. It's a sort of freedom that comes from knowing the grace and the unconditional love of God. It's the knowledge that grace is a gift. There's nothing we can do to earn God's favor. God just loves you whether you like it or not. And knowing that we have that kind of unconditional love, that kind of a God, it frees us. It frees us to live lives of service to our neighbor. It frees us to quit worrying about our own self-worth and to know that we are of exceptional worth to this God of ours. Today, we're going to take a look at one of the main stories in the Bible that give us a glimpse of God's grace. It's if there was a story that gave us a glimpse of who this God of ours is, it's this story. It's the story of the prodigal son. If you were to pull up your Bible, look at chapter 15 of the book of Luke, beginning at the 11th verse. And there we get the story of the prodigal son. Now, I'm not going to read all of it today, but the gist of the story is this. There was a son of a man who had inheritance. And that son, before his father was even dead, get this, he had the gall to go to his father and said, "I want my inheritance now, before you're dead." In a sense, what that son was saying to his dad is, "Dad, it'd be better if you were dead. You'd be worth more to me if you were dead." Can you imagine? Well, the father, being this father of grace, he gave the son his inheritance. And the son, the prodigal son, he went off and squandered it all. We imagine he squandered it all on waste, on womanizing, on booze, on reckless living. And before long, he had nothing. He had nothing. In fact, the passage says that he found himself eating the pods that were fed to the pigs. In that Jewish ancient society, any reference to pigs meant that you were amongst the lowest of the low. Pigs were despicable. They were forbidden. They were sort of an unclean animal that nobody went in contact with. And if you were associating yourself with pigs, you know you had hit rock bottom. Well, in the story in chapter 15, around verse 17, we hear that son sort of wakes up after a night of debauchery. He wakes up with a hangover, and it says this. When he came to his senses, he said this, "How many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death?" And so what does he do? He puts his tail between his legs, and he makes his way back to his father's home. And here's what I love about this story. That father, he should have had some words for his son. As his son was coming down the road, he could have went inside, shut the door, locked it, turned off the lights, and sent a clear message to that son. But instead, in Luke chapter 15, verse 20, I find my favorite passage in the entire Bible. It says, "So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long ways off, his father saw him coming down the road, and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him." See, the point of this story is that's how this God of ours looks at you and me. There's nothing we can do to earn or lose God's favor. When I was in college, I had a girlfriend that I needed to travel about 30, 40 miles to get to her house from college. And one night, I'll admit, I drove out to her house and it got way too late. I was exhausted but needed to get back to school for classes the next morning. And so I got in my car and I drove that 40 miles from this girlfriend's house all the way into Fargo-Moorhead to get to Concordia College, where I was going to college. But along the way, I hate to admit this, I fell asleep at the wheel. And as I fell asleep at the wheel, my arms on the steering wheel went to the left, and the car careened into the guardrails, messed up the entire car, destroyed the car. And I'll never forget sort of coming to in the middle of the night there on the side of the road, my car smoking, and a police officer pulled up and he handed me a cell phone and said, "I think there's probably someone you need to call." And that's when I called my father. And I'll never forget what my father said to me. I said, "Dad," and I was just bawling. I couldn't hold it together. I said, "Dad, I destroyed the car. I wrecked the car." And I'll never forget what my dad said. He said, "Son, I don't care about the car." He said, "We can replace cars, but we can't replace you. Are you okay?" You see, that's the kind of love that this God of ours has for people like you and people like me. It's the love that that father had for the prodigal son. It's the sort of love my father had for me, and it's the very same love that God has for you. You can't earn it, and you'll never lose it. Folks, thanks for tuning in to the Daily Dose today. If you're watching online, maybe on Facebook, would you give us a thumbs up? Would you like it? If you're watching on YouTube, hit the little bell so you get notifications of other videos that come out. And if you're watching on Cable Access 181, invite a friend to watch with you tomorrow. Thanks, gang.